Be open for something wonderful to happen. Be open to the possibility. Be open for something wonderful to happen. Be open to the possibility. Aye, 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 aye. Be open for something wonderful to happen. Be open to the possibility. Be open for something wonderful to happen. Be open to the possibility.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharmila Curry, and I am delighted to be your worship associate this morning. Although the doors to our building are closed to do our part in preventing the spread of disease, we are still a vibrant congregation with open minds, spirits, and hearts. This morning, I welcome you into my home and the homes of this morning's music director and our morning speaker. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your home. Normally, if you would like more information about FirstU, it would be available at the welcome table at the back of the pews. However, while the FirstU building is closed because of the COVID-19 virus, you may instead contact us through email at welcome@firstunitarian.ca. I repeat, for more information, please email us at welcome@firstunitarian.ca. After this service and future services, our normal hospitality hour will be replaced by a virtual getting together. If you would like to join us for the hospitality hour on Zoom, please see our website, www.firstunitarianottawa.ca, or our weekly email newsletter, the EUU, for information on how to do so. It is a beautiful thing to think that even though we are in separate places, protecting ourselves and others by staying away from a crowd, here we are together online, listening, connecting, and soon singing. I hope this moment finds you well. A few more announcements. While the building is closed, staff are working remotely and are monitoring emails during usual working hours. Phone calls will be checked less regularly, so please do email for a quicker response. As we won't be seeing each other in person, it is more important than ever to sign up to receive the EUU, our weekly email newsletter, check our Facebook page and our web page for notices and updates. Our online calendar is as full as ever. Today we welcome our guest speaker, Anne Bokma. I had an opportunity to read Anne's book, and I'm very much looking forward to her talk today. Anne is an award-winning freelance journalist and the author of My Year of Living Spiritually, From Woo-Woo to Wonderful, One Woman's Secular Quest for a More Soulful Life, published by Douglas and McIntyre in October 2019. A leading expert on North America's 80 million strong spiritual but not religious demographic, Anne was the award-winning spiritual but secular columnist for the United Church Observer, now Broadview, for 4 years before writing her popular My Year of Living Spiritually blog for the magazine. Anne also leads workshops and gives presentations on topics relating to spirituality and writing, and is the founder of the 6-minute memoir, Speed Storytelling for a Cause. It's a series which features storytellers sharing tales on a common theme within a strict 6-minute time limit. The event has raised more than $45,000 for local charities in her hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, since 2013. Her work has been honored with many awards, including from the Canadian Association of Journalists, the City of Hamilton, and the U.S. Associated Church Press. Anne is the mother of 2 grown daughters and makes her home in Hamilton, Ontario, where she is an active member of the First Unitarian Church. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, and however you identify, today you are part of our spiritual community. Welcome. We hope you come back soon. I would now like to share some opening words. The opening words are from Carolyn Miss. Your spirit is the part of you that is seeking meaning and some purpose. That's one way someone can relate to that. Another way is to understand spirit is that it's the part of you that is drawn to hope, that will not give in to despair. The part of you that has to believe in goodness, that has to believe in something more. Please join us in singing the chalice lighting song.
Chalice, chalice, burning bright, help remind us with your light of how we'd like to live each day with love and truth helping lead the way.
This morning's story for all ages is from Lawrence and Karen Kushner and is illustrated by Don Majewski. Where is God? Where is God? God is in the beginning, in the first red tomato, and in cookies fresh from the oven, in the first day of summer, and in the tiny hands of a baby. Where is God? God is in the end, in the last bite of birthday cake, and in your worn, torn baby blanket, in the last wave goodbye, and in the last years of life. Where is God? God is in the way people come together, in the sharing of a morning, and in the Band-Aid fix-up after a fall, in homemade gifts, and in morning hugs and goodnight kisses. Where is God? God is in the world, in bird chirp, frog song, and chattering squirrels, and in the fly caught in the spider's web, in caterpillars chewing daisies, and in worms turning leaves into earth. Where is God? God is everywhere. God is wherever we look.
I brought my spirit to that fiercely burned my tears. Upright I rose from bended knee to meet the asking years.
This is the time in our service where we are drawn closer to the heart of love at our center and hold those both near and far, loved ones and strangers, in our hearts. I would like to place a pebble in the bowl to represent all of the struggles people are facing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Struggles related to health, struggles related to social isolation, struggles related to financial hardship. This pebble represents those who are struggling during the pandemic. I would now like to place a pebble in the water to represent all the joy that we see during the pandemic. Joys related to communities coming closer together, neighbors helping one another, and individuals trying to make a difference in their communities. I will place one last pebble in the bowl to represent all of our joys and sorrows that remain in our hearts and minds. Please join us in a moment of stillness. I would like to share 2 short readings with you this morning. The first is from William Stafford, The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. And our second reading comes from Scott Alexander, the author of, or the editor of, a book called Everyday Spiritual Practice. And this is a short excerpt from the introduction to his book. While working on this collection, I was often asked, what makes an everyday spiritual practice different from a casual spiritual hobby? Something worthwhile that one simply dabbles in when one feels like it. The answer is intentionality, regularity, and depth. Whether it is sitting Zen, doing charitable giving, working with a spiritual director, or tending your relationship with loved ones, what shapes your efforts into an everyday spiritual practice is your commitment to making the activity a regular and significant part of your life.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anne Bokma, and I am delighted to be joining the Unitarians in Ottawa today. Thank you so much for having me as part of your service. I'm sitting in my backyard in Hamilton. I have my chalice lit, as you can see, and I'm very happy to be talking to you today about my new memoir, My Year of Living Spiritually, One Woman's Secular Quest for a More Soulful Life, which was published last fall. My book is about the year that I devoted myself to being more devotional. In 2017, I set out to engage in 24 different spiritual practices. Everything from goat yoga to singing in choirs, going on a pilgrimage to swim in Henry David Thoreau's iconic Walden Pond. I meditated, I tried forest therapy. I went to the Women's March in Washington. I created a home altar complete with crystals and essential oils, gave up wine for the 40 days of Lent. I worked with a soul coach. I went to a week-long witch camp at Unicamp. I Marie Kondoed my home and got rid of about a third of my possessions. I learned to read tarot, embraced solitude by living in a treehouse for a few days. I even tried magic mushrooms for the first time, and I can tell you it was quite the trip. Every day I wrote down things I was thankful for, and I got a tattoo. It was a whirlwind year. So why did I do all this? I partly have Donald Trump to thank. If you'll recall, the year 2017 started with the election of this new scary president in the White House, and like many of you, I suspect, I despaired about what this meant for the world. And I thought that cultivating a deeper spiritual life might help me face the coming days with a greater sense of resolve instead of a hopeless sense of defeat. But there was another reason as well. I had turned 56 and midlife had hit with a wallop. My kids were off to university and I was facing the prospect of the looming empty nest. There were challenges in my 30-year marriage, and I had developed some not so great personal habits. Netflix had become my church, the couch my pew, and wine the sacrament I used to smooth out the rough edges of life. My phone had become my Bible, the thing I clasped in my hands as if it held all the wisdom of the universe. And I was addicted to being busy. My version of the 10 Commandments was my to-do list. It's challenging to tend to our spiritual selves when our lives are so full of multitasking, duties, and obligations. And the trouble with believing your life only has value if you're productive is that you can never sit still. When we do take time for ourselves, we often feel guilty, especially women. Erica Jong, the writer, says, "Women are their own worst enemies, and guilt is our main weapon of self-torture. Show me a woman who doesn't feel guilty, and I'll show you a man." I was also still grappling with the pangs of alienation from my family of origin. Years earlier, I had left the strict fundamentalist church I was raised in, and my family had never really forgiven me. The word religion comes from the Latin word meaning to bind, but in my case, religion represented a great unraveling of family ties. My mother and I had been estranged for the last decade before I wrote my book. And life was shifting in other ways. I had attended 4 funeral services in the last year and no weddings. It's funny how that starts to happen, right? I knew there were now far more days behind me than ahead of me, and I wanted to make those days more meaningful. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives, says the writer Anne Dillard. Like many of you, perhaps, I wondered and worried about how the last third of my life was going to unfold. In midlife, we're told to worry more about our sagging skin than our flagging spirit. We spend a lot of time and money and effort on the exterior of our lives, how we dress, our homes, our cars, how well our kids are doing. But how much attention do we really give to our inner life, our interior life? How much do we nourish the inner sanctuary of our being? I would argue that midlife is when we become more reflective. We understand what really matters. We've experienced loss and struggle, and we're closer to the end of our lives. It's a time when we may feel a certain restlessness or a sense of urgency about tending to our spiritual selves. The great poet Mary Oliver said that attention is the beginning of devotion. I wanted to stop and pay attention. So I set out on my own Eat, Pray, Love experiment, a sort of do-it-yourself path to enlightenment. Except unlike Elizabeth Gilbert, who I greatly admire, I didn't have tens of thousands of dollars to spend, meditating on a mountaintop in Bali. Instead, I experimented with a broad range of spiritual practices, most right in my own backyard. Another reason I wanted to embark on this adventure and write a book about it is that I hoped it would help people like me who'd felt trapped in fundamentalist religions and saw no way out. I grew up in the strict Canadian Reformed community, Dutch Reformed community, and I went to church twice on Sunday, prayed before every meal, read the Bible after, went to private Christian schools. Church was the center of our existence, an insular place that protected us from worldly influences like evolution and dancing. And I'm one of those people, there are millions of us former fundamentalists, who was raised with the notion that we were born wretched sinners, never quite good enough just the way we were. Guilt was a unifying theme of our religious life. As the Jewish-American comedian Kathy Ladman says, all religions are the same, guilt, but with different holidays. When I left the fundamentalist church of my youth, I was threatened with excommunication. I was told I was going to hell. And when I lost my faith, I lost my family. But I wanted to show that it's possible to get out. It's often painful, but you can do this with the right support. Everyone's spiritual journey is unique to them, and we should all be free to discover and develop it on our own and not be coerced into belief. There are many like me who have left religion. In fact, only 1 in 5 Canadians goes to religious services anymore, and 10,000 churches are closing in Canada in the next decade. About 80 million North Americans are considered spiritual but not religious. Being spiritual but not religious is not a new idea. The 18th century transcendentalists were the first to consider themselves SBNR. Led by the great philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, they believe spiritual truth is known intuitively rather than learned through institutions. They believed we are born good, not sinful. They believed God was in nature rather than the church. Instead of relying on biblical authority, they relied on themselves. Make your own Bible, Emerson urged. Sometimes we're suspicious about spirituality, and talking about it can make people uncomfortable, but it's a conversation worth having. The great spiritual writer Thomas More says the big problem of our time is loss of soul. And I think this is evident in the high rates of depression and loneliness we see all around us. 1 in 5 people, Canadians, take a psychiatric medication, and about 40% of people say they're chronically lonely. I think many of us are suffering from a spiritual hunger, and I wanted to look for ways to satisfy that hunger. As I approached my year of living spiritually, I combined a seeker's enthusiasm with a reporter's skepticism to the experiences that I engaged with. I've been a journalist for 30 years and had sort of honed my chops in terms of reporting on different experiences, but this was the first time I really immersed myself fully in them. Some of the things I did during my year could be described as woo-woo, like using crystals or having your chakras balanced or doing a past life regression session. A lot of people, I think, use the term woo-woo or new age in a dismissive way to make fun of the whole notion of being spiritual but not religious. But I believe spiritual practices like these and many others can help fortify us to become better people in the world, can build us up and offer us comfort and peace. And that's not at all self-indulgent. And I do think that a lot of these practices are dismissed because it's usually women who engage in them. It's a form of sexism, really. Billions of people believe in ideas such as the existence of an unproven God or a holy Virgin Mother, and that's considered perfectly normal. But as soon as we consider alternative practices such as Reiki or crystals or forest therapy or tarot or pagans dancing under a full moon, they're considered frivolous. These practices, many of which can be deeply meaningful and healing, are dismissed simply because they are followed predominantly by women. And I wanted to challenge the notion that they are simply woo-woo. So did I end up a more spiritual person at the end of my year? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. But I will tell you this, the year offered a lot of answers about how to live more attentively and authentically in the world. It made me consider what it means to be a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a good person. And it also resulted in significant changes in a couple of major relationships in my life. It meant forgiveness, not just of others, but of myself. I made peace with the past and changed the course of my future. Religion almost wrecked me, but spirituality saved me. Emily Dickinson said, "The soul should always stand ajar, ready to welcome the ecstatic experience." I'm glad I pushed open that door, and I invite you to walk through it with me. Who knows what you might find on the other side? I'd like to conclude my talk today by sharing a reading from the chapter 6, Finding My Voice, in which I write about music and choirs. I joined several community choirs. I took a professional singing lesson and found out I was an alto. I was invited to a singcation retreat on the coast of Newfoundland, which was an amazing experience. And I also participated for one afternoon in a deathbed choir along with the music director of Toronto Unitarian Church. And I'm going to read a portion of that and end my talk with this reading right now. I have not been up close with death and suffering very often, and I'm not prepared for what I see. Several of the patients in the chronic care section are unconscious, kept alive by machines attached to their windpipes. The first woman is about my age. Her eyes are closed and her mouth hangs slack. She is missing several teeth, and as we gather around her bed, I can see from the outline of her form under the covers that she is also missing her legs from the knees down. A car accident, I wonder? Her blue hospital gown is thin, and I can see one breast is gone. Breast cancer? So many missing pieces. But the window ledge in her room is full. There are plants in bloom, cards and photos from another life. In one she looks vibrant and carefree, standing on a tropical beach with what I assume is her grown son and a grandchild. There's a Mother's Day card addressed to a special mum. I naively hope for some slight movement in her face as we sing, but it doesn't come. I don't know what's happened to this woman, but I do know she is loved. As we enter the room of a patient who looks to be in her early 40s, her elderly mother is standing next to her bed. Yes, please sing, says the mother, and we launch into a short selection. The mother never stops touching her daughter, patting her shiny black hair, adjusting the cotton padding around her trach tube, lifting her hand to check to see if her daughter's already perfectly manicured fingernails need further trimming. When we finish our last song, the mother claps her hands and looks brightly over at her daughter, but there's no response. Afterward, I'll learn that the daughter has been in hospital for 7 years, non-responsive for the last few. At first, I wonder why the parents have kept her artificially alive, but then I imagine that this is one of my daughters, in a silent coma for years, her heart still beating, her fingernails still growing, still needing her mother still needing her. Machines hiss and beep as we make our way from room to room. Wheelchairs crowd the hallways, and some rooms have a foul smell. As we head back to the volunteer room to put away our vests and songbooks, we pass a large room with half a dozen elderly women in it, some in hospital beds and some bent over wheelchairs. A young male orderly at one end of the room is holding an iPhone that's playing a tinny version of John Lennon's Imagine. He's singing to the women, a few of whom follow along in quavery voices. When the orderly sees us, he invites us to sing for this group. We oblige, and some patients from the hallway also maneuver into the room. Soon there are patients all around us. Some clap their hands, some know all the lyrics, a few continue sleeping. One woman in a wheelchair raises her bent head every once in a while, looks at us, and simply moans. Some of these women are barefoot. Some have brightly painted toenails, which I take as a hopeful sign. Their legs are thin and fragile, like the limbs of schoolgirls dangling from monkey bars. More women in wheelchairs are congregating in the hallway, jockeying like bumper cars, following the call of our voices. We've practically got a concert going on here. A middle-aged woman comes into the room, goes over to the moaning woman in the wheelchair and strokes her thin gray hair, whispering gently into her ear, which quiets her momentarily. There is certainly despair here among those who are confused and feeble and dying, but there is love too. Music soothes us at the beginning of life and comforts us at the end. It achieves the miraculous task of simultaneously expressing our suffering and offering solace. Our little choir moves into the hallway because the room is getting overcrowded. As we line up against the wall, the moaning woman gestures to her daughter to move her wheelchair closer to us. As we sing, she begins to mouth the words slowly. And in her confused and innocent face, I can imagine the young girl she once was, and also the old woman I'll become, if I'm lucky enough to live another 30 years. All these mothers and daughters administering so tenderly to each other makes me think of my own mother and what it will be like for her at the end, whether she'll want me to stroke her hair. I think of my daughters and how I hope they'll outlive me by decades, how I hope I can hold their hands when my time comes, how I hope there will be music to mark my ending. Maybe even this little light of mine, the song my mother once sang to me. That would be a comfort, I believe, as my particular candle goes from a flame to a flicker and then is extinguished. If we're lucky, our lives begin with someone singing to us and end that way too. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to your congregation today. I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but it's about to start pouring out here, which will be a relief because it's been so hot. It's been lovely to be with you. And I do want to let you know that you can find out more about me and my book. I offer Zoom book clubs and talks to community organizations. You can find out more about me and my book at annbokma.com. And I am offering free mailing anywhere in Canada of my book. It's $25 during COVID-19 because it's hard for people to get the book. And I do want to get it into as many hands as possible. So you can email me through my website if you'd like to find out more about that. And thank you again so much, Ottawa, for having me. And enjoy the rest of your summer.
This is the time in our service where we usually accept the offering. You may go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how you may keep up with your pledge or make a donation during these times. We give these gifts freely. We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of the congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our stories from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
I would now like to share some closing words. Our closing words come from Patricia Hughes Scott. Be able to change your mind. Be able to accept new ideas. To be able to see a better way. Keep an open, aware mind. Do not become set in your ways of thinking. Do not wear blinkers. As the world changes, change with it. and you will grow in spirit. Please join us in singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Quod vidas quari de justitia, tenurimur cielum potuam, succede vievermos, Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body,